Last month, the Department of Broadband, Communications and the Digital Economy released its final report as part of its review into the Interactive Gambling Act. And joining me to discuss is Jamie Nettleton, who's a partner at Addison's. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kate. Nice to be here.
Now, Jamie, firstly, could you run us through the major recommendations to come out of the report?
There are a number of recommendations that came from the report, Kate. The principal recommendations really very much depend on the interest of the party actually looking at it. A lot of people had seen this as being the final report coming from the department in connection with the liberalisation of restrictions which are in the Interactive Gambling Act, essentially prohibiting the provision of interactive gaming services to Australian residents. In essence, what that means is online casino services are currently prohibited, and there was a number of comments made that Australia's approach was inconsistent with its first world trading partners, and therefore it should liberalise those restrictions. And indeed it did, but only to a limited extent, by essentially recommending the implementation of a pilot study in connection with the liberalisation of online poker tournaments, really as a precursor to seeing whether or not further steps should be taken.
And Jamie, what are the likely impacts of the report on online wagering, gaming and social gaming?
Well, again, you've got to look at it in respect of each individual sector. When looking at the actual recommendations report, one has to look at it in connection with the government's press release which came out on the same day. The government said in respect of any recommendation that was made in respect of liberalisation, which extended both in connection with the online poker trial, which I've just mentioned, but also in the context of in-play betting essentially being liberalised to a certain extent. They said that should not occur until there has been a harm minimisation standard developed nationally by each of the states and territories under the auspices of COAG. Now, from my perspective, that's going to take a long time. COAG's only met once on this issue a couple of years ago, and getting agreement between the states and territories will be quite a difficult proposition in respect of a harm minimisation standard. So, in summary, recommendations were made for liberalisation, but it's not going to occur in the short term.
Jamie, of course the federal election is due to take place in September. Do you think we're likely to see any action taken by the government before this time? And of course, what happens if the opposition wins? Is there bipartisan support for reform?
At this stage, the federal opposition's made their point clear that they don't believe that there should be any liberalisation of the position. That statement was made a year ago in connection with the interim report. We'll have to wait to see, one, if they're going to be elected at the next federal election, and secondly, whether they're going to hold a consistent view. Will there be legislation between now and the federal election? I think that's very much dependent on Senator Di Natale's bill, whether that obtains some support. There's certainly a lot of public support for there being greater controls in respect of the broadcasting of odds in respect of sporting events. That's currently the subject of hearings before the Joint Select Committee, but whether or not that becomes legislation, we'll have to wait to see.
Well, Jamie, just finally, is there anything that industry can or should be doing now to prepare?
Well, again, it's a difficult thing because we're talking about what is the industry here. We've got the online wagering operators, we've got the potential online gaming operators, which could be the online wagering operators already conducting business in Australia, or it could be new entrants coming to the Australian market. Each of them will have to look at this report differently. But because nothing's going to happen quickly, nothing fundamental has to change. But what will happen in respect to the online wagering sector is that they will continue to develop industry standards in respect of harm minimisation, in respect of advertising controls, and indeed a number of these measures are already in place.
Well, some interesting insights there, Jamie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kate. Lovely to be here.